This is Dr. Manisha Aluwalia. She's an infectious disease doctor based in Baltimore. We catch up every few years, and I was happy to recently connect with her as she has gone and is going through transitions and transformations. On top of her interesting journey, I love seeing that woman smile. Her smile is big, generous, and genuine.
I'm
Thank
excited.
you for making the time. It seems as though, based on my exchange with Anastasia, you are a very wanted woman. Your life is like, woo!
It's all by choice, and sometimes I question those choices, but that's all right.
Can you tell me like what that involves beyond
Yeah.
like being a physician and
Well,
whatever?
that's
Oh,
one of them. Like, actually, managing a career of a physician that's not full time employed in one facility is more challenging because I'm managing contracts from multiple hospitals, schedules from multiple hospitals, payrolls from multiple hospitals, and
that's
just
called a hustle, a
yes,
freelance hustle.
it's the freelance hustle, which
Yeah.
I'm still learning because I just started all of this basically March of last year. So the freelance hustle, I totally love it. Yeah.
How, I mean, can you, I'm not going to go completely off the tangent, but you know, I would think that being a physician, there's a sense of consistency, like if you were to go see your doctor or if you need to go see somebody, like
Mm.
there's a sense of, I think that we rely on sense of consistency because it's the comfort inducing that we're seeking, right? I was just actually having a conversation with my mom about that. She said,
Mm.
back in the old days, you had one doctor that saw you when you were given birth to, through your developmental years, through your teenage years, so they knew kind of the things that were off, so they kind of followed you along and they can
Mm.
anticipate and know sort of what your body could be possibly changing to.
Mm.
And that has definitely shifted. I'm not going to say that in medicine I feel like an algorithm, but I could see that. So how does like a physician work freelance? Like what does that look like for you?
That's a Do I think that it's, or how do I manage it? Well, I think when you become a doctor and you practice however much you practice, whether it's full time, part time, freelance, it's still a part of you. So when you walk into the hospital, you almost take on that role. It just kind of
Hmm.
automatically encompasses your being for the day. And especially when you're in the room with the patient, you just transition into that role and you serve that role. And really, it's like anything else, it's just about connecting with the patient in the room. Once they start to talk and they start telling you your story, I mean their story, then you can piece together what the problem is and you move on. It's a single encounter with that one person
Mm.
that really is the crux of what I do as a freelance doctor, right? So I just have to solve that one person's problem. And that one person has a history of medical issues or life that has happened, which is why the infectious disease specialty is well known in terms of putting together the entire story. Like if you want to know what's going on with a patient, go and read the infectious disease consultation note because it will put everything together for you. So it's still a full story in one encounter. And that's kind of what the infectious disease freelance world looks like to me.
I have to say that I love hearing that you could just really tap into immediately. When people say like dropping in the zone, whether it's workout or if it's a creative endeavor or um, writing music, the fact that you could say as a doctor that the moment that you step into that office and you're meeting a patient, you're in that zone, you're there for them, they're not a number, you're dealing with them and you're hearing them and addressing what their needs are. And I feel like in my personal encounters, and I'm saying that I had limited amount and I'd like to keep it that way, but I wouldn't say that everybody's that way. So I'm very happy to hear that this is how you approach your patients.
Yeah, I guess it's the way I was raised in medicine. I was taught by a wonderful, wonderful mentor, Dr. James Rahal, the late Dr. James Rahal, and he and I connected on a level that was more spiritual, I would say, and that's kind of how he taught me. You ask the patient the right question, they'll tell you what their problem is.
Mm,
So,
mm, yes. Yeah. Let me ask, that's an interesting notion. I'm an extremely emotional person and fairly sensitive, and you know, you seem to be very empathetic and very kind and very engaged. You know, and so um, how do you make sure that it does not have, or do you know if it does not have subconscious impact on you, the level of stress and like, you know, people's um, uh, situations that you encounter? I'm sure some of them are more dire than others. Like,
Yeah.
how do you know that you're taking care of yourself, that you're like not pressing against those limits?
I think, 13 years into my career as a physician, I think I've learned what are my limits, how much I'm willing to give of myself versus keep for myself.
Mm,
It's become, it's just natural now. I think I know my limits. I know how to enforce them. Boundaries have become important to me. And it's the same whether it's medicine or my personal
sorry,
life.
this is New York. You hear
Okay, sorry.
it.
Apologize.
um, do you think that part of your and I'm just going to use that as a natural way to segue. You know, you have been a physician for a long time. That was your main career. It allowed you, I mean, you worked here in actually, it would have been the thick of it
Yeah.
in Flushing Hospital. Is that where you were?
Yeah, New York Hospital Queens in Flushing. Good
There
memory.
you go. And, you know, you have your life had brought you, or you kind of ventured out with your husband to do Doctors Without Borders, and then you were trying all these different things, and obviously in our conversation we landed on you doing the coaching work and finding your footing there and sort of like grounding yourself. Do you feel like seeking out all of those different experiences is a necessity to balance out, you know, the intensity of what you were doing up until that point with as a doctor, as a physician?
That's a great way to look at it. I hadn't ever looked at it that way. I think most of us are now labeling what we experience in medicine as burnout from
Mm,
being underappreciated and from not knowing how to implement the solutions that we all have in our minds that we all keep suggesting but have not been put into place. Coming to grips with the fact that medicine is a business and this is not exactly what we signed up for. And we label it as burnout, but I think it's interesting what you're saying. It's like maybe because of that we see in medicine and the entity of medicine that it is, we find other things to create balance when we can't create balance in medicine. Work-life balance in medicine, I know that's a buzzword, but it's almost impossible for most people. And then when you start to step out of medicine a little bit, whether it be part-time or just um, freelance, then you start to see what else you want to use your time for. When I yelled at a patient in an exam room, that was when I said, okay, it's over. This is I've chipped away at the hours to the point where I'm as low as I'm going to go in terms of FTE. So I was working a 0.75 FTE schedule. And I yelled at a patient. It still wasn't enough for me to recover on the time that I had off. To come back and yell at a patient, I couldn't. I mean, it wasn't the only thing going on in life. Life was still happening. So there was personal things happening. But that was the point where I said, okay, now we need to really make some changes because this is not who I am. I don't yell at patients.
yeah, I was going to say that must have been a really, really high threshold,
Yeah.
because I think that it would take a lot for you to lose your cool, just because I think that you're extremely level-headed and
Yeah.
empathetic and kind. Like that would,
Yeah.
whatever is happening, I think you can make the separation that's happening out there and it's my life, but that has nothing to do with this person. So the fact that you're feeling that
Yeah.
way, I can only imagine.
And I know that patient needed extra care and extra attention at each visit, and so did his wife. And he was, dying of AIDS. And I gave him all the time I had, but there were times where when he didn't do what I was suggesting, it was just too much for me with everything else going
Mm.
on. And I didn't know how else to get the point across. And I think that's when I raised my voice.
Do you feel ever like, do you ever have this really huge sense of responsibility and weight about another person's life and well-being?
Luckily, no.
Okay, good.
Luckily, I know that it's an adult and it's their responsibility ultimately. My mentor, late Dr. James Rahal, that same question that he said, if you, or the same statement that he made, ask the right question and they'll give you the answer. But it's the same thing in even outpatient office encounter. You don't know where that person is that day.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know what they're bringing into the room with them, what else is happening in their life. So you just have to keep asking questions. How much do you want to accomplish today in our 10 minutes that we have together?
Yes, 10 minutes.
And
Wow.
the lack of time of getting deep in conversation with a person to try to help them, that's the other cause of burnout. Like the model that I worked in, the very end, it's called a federally qualified health center. That it's just quick 20-minute appointments, but 20 minutes means about 10-12 minutes with the patient, and then all the other stuff that you got to do before moving on.
Yeah.
It's too much for me.
How do you feel since you've stepped back and are in this like week on, week off, if I gathered right?
Yeah.
What have you gained in that experience? Like, how has that benefited your practice as a physician and also just sort of your internal ability to manage all that?
I think it's shown me how important it is to keep my agency. Like I am choosing this day of work. This is not me trying to earn a paycheck on a employed hospital position. It's me
Mm-hmm.
going in for a day's work as a freelancer because I'm choosing to take this day's work on. And so it becomes much more meaningful when you realize it's a choice. It's out of agency that I'm doing this. It's not just because I have to.
I
So
love
that's
hearing
what it's
that.
helped me
Yes,
understand. Doing
that
medicine
makes
when you
sense.
want to because you have chosen to is really different.
Yeah. Tell me, how has, you have completed your studies for coaching, and I'm assuming part of this burnout was to seek out something along those lines. Can you just share like how coaching sort of came into your life? I'm assuming it came in that transition.
Yes, absolutely. I think at the height of burnout, I was introduced to a Facebook group and or a podcast. Either way, it was there's some people who have different ideas than I do, and they're not afraid to talk about them. And their ideas sound really different than the Indian upbringing I've had and all the belief systems that I've had. And so hearing new thoughts from people that are very like me, but also different from me. So physicians, but not Indian, physicians from different specialties, physicians who are working different schedules than I was, just all these new ideas. And it was like, why are they so able to speak with confidence and do what they want to do? And why do I feel like there must be more to life? Why do I feel like I'm stuck? And so started hearing in this Facebook group that there's thing called coaching and what a life coach is. And so I started joining some groups where you get coached. So I was in two groups at the same time, and one of them was actually both were led by physicians. So these are physicians who are coaches. So I got a taste of what that's like to be a client. And definitely I started changing just my thought processes. So joining the community, hearing the thoughts, trying on other people's thoughts, changing my mindset. That's kind of where it all started. And then I started realizing the power of this mindset work that these coaches are doing, and they're doing it for themselves. They're seeing results for themselves. I tried it on. I saw results for myself, and now I wanted to do the same for others. So that's where the pull towards becoming a coach came from.
I have to ask you a question when you talk about your Indian upbringing. And I mean, you grew up in Texas and you're
Mm.
very American, right? How do you, what's the sort of, I wouldn't say the hang up, but I'm not sure how else to phrase it. Like,
Yeah.
what's the difference of being raised as an Indian and then pursuing, being a physician, et cetera? Like, what's the crux, like, what's the thing there that feels like it was inhibiting you to be open, to these ideas that seem very normal for other people?
So my parents are immigrants, and they came from India and married in the 1970s. And I grew up with my dad's siblings and their children. So my cousins were all around me. My grandparents were around me. My great grandmother was around me. They all came from India after my dad came. So my upbringing, although it was in America, was extremely culturally Indian, and which was amazing. But we have kind of conservative rules about how you conduct your behavior, how you dress, how you talk, what your limits are when you speak with adults, when you speak with somebody in authority, maybe even when you speak with somebody who's white. And there were just these unwritten rules. And for somebody like me who has a lot of ideas, I don't want to be confined to those rules. And they weren't explicitly written or said, but they were there in the environment, in the culture, in the traditions that I grew up in. And so I did feel internally that I'm not supposed to do anything outside of the norm. So doctor, lawyer, engineer was an acceptable career. Anything outside of that probably wasn't. You're supposed to get married. You're supposed to have children. You're supposed to marry somebody of the opposite sex. Those sorts of things. And yeah.
And do you feel that now, as 40-something-year-old woman with a career behind her, a full-on life experience in so many different levels, do you feel that you're able to be more free in your family environment when you go visit your family?
Yes and no.
Yes and no?
Yes and no.
But I'm assuming you're okay about it now.
I'm okay knowing that there are certain rules that you still follow, just because this is the culture that we want to preserve, and we take with it some of the good stuff. And I think some of it is good, to respect your elders, to defer to what they say, at least listen to what they say. You don't talk over them, you don't talk at them, that kind of thing. So those kinds of things, I think they're fair, but I also still sometimes question this authoritarian culture that we grew up in.
And coaching, how's that going, by the way?
Going
I
good.
wanted to actually circle back on that, because you had mentioned that after going through the coaching experience and finding the group and the subgroups, et cetera, and you mentioning the whole uniqueness of growing up in an Indian culture in the United States, you felt like you could offer that to your community, be a community that you know, or it's the community of people that have been brought up by immigrants and Indian immigrants, and like this culture that sort of is, how do you reconcile the two? So have you been able to narrow that in and find your people and find?
That's exactly where I am now. So I've defined what I want to do, which is exactly what you described. I want to help Indian professionals who want to create more connection with their parents, even though their lifestyle choices may not be what their parents envisioned for them. And that's where I am kind of brainstorming copy, if you will, and putting it out there for people to see, this is what I'm doing. This is what my voice is. This is what I sound like. This is what I look like. This is how I can help. This is why I'm helping. This is why I've chosen this specific problem to solve. And I am ready to make this happen, but in whatever time it takes. Like, I'm not in a rush. They call it, so I'm in a marketing coaching program. And so it's just called warming the audience. Let them know who you are, what you do, and why they might want to work with you.
Yeah. And you married a person, you've done well for your family and for yourself. You married a person that is, he's Punjabi also, right?
He's not, he's Telugu, so he's South Indian.
Okay. And is that okay? Does that work?
That wasn't ideal, according to my parents.
It wasn't ideal, but it's acceptable.
It's acceptable.
It's acceptable. How does your life as a couple and a progressive modern, I don't know if his family is immigrant, like, is he?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you see yourself, like, you two, second in the next wave? Like, what are your ways of living? Because I know there's so much culture that you come with. How does that blend into your life now?
I think we like to test boundaries, both of us individually and as a couple. I think, he's a former Peace Corps volunteer, so he left, good government job income to go and volunteer with the Peace Corps for 2 years. and then he cycled for a few months, and that sort of thing, and then he drives a
Yeah.
motorcycle, and then and I did the Doctors Without Borders thing. So again, leaving steady income to go and volunteer. So I think we like to push it, and also because we've been given the privileges, right? So they gave us everything that we needed to get educated and to have
Mm.
the jobs and to have a foundation that we can test the boundaries with. So we can leave the comfort of what we know and have and are secure with to see how we can volunteer in the world, to see if that feels good, like that we were afforded that, but they weren't. And so we like to test it, but we also enjoy it. And then now as a couple, we're sort of doing more traditional things.
What's that when you say that you guys are doing more traditional things? What does that mean?
Oh, well, we got married, and
Were
for
you not thinking about it? Like, were you just like, we're just gonna
it
live
sounds
together?
to me, when talking to his parents, it sounds to me like he wasn't thinking about it. But when we started living together, then he got the push. Like, no, 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 you can't live together but not be married. You can't go to Africa and not be married. We went there for Doctors Without Borders together. And that was one thing. So getting married was traditional. We decided we didn't want children for the first few years of our marriage, and then he decided we wanted children, and then I decided that we wanted children. So now we're trying for children, and so that is another more traditional approach to life. So married, children, that kind of thing, steady jobs.
Okay. You gave me a little bit of an insight when we spoke a couple of months ago
Mhm.
about, I know your hesitation. You didn't want to have kids, wanted to have kids, didn't want to have kids, wanted to have kids, and then you're putting yourself through what seems to be a pretty big ordeal
Hmm.
to do this. How are you on that front? You were about to start treatment when I was, I think, speaking to you. How's that going, if I can ask?
I would love for more people to hear what this is all about and what it's like. But yeah, I started out with my husband agreeing that we didn't need to have kids because we were volunteers in the world, and that was going to be our life, and we were going to be here and there, and children might have been a hindrance, and there's plenty of children in the world if we wanted to have one we could adopt. So that changed a year after working in Uganda, and his friends had kids and he wanted kids, and I had not changed my mind like he had. So we were in that space for 3 years, hit rock bottom, and then I decided that I wanted to be in this marriage and I wanted to be his wife. I wanted him to be my husband. I wanted our relationship the way it was. I liked it, and I would do what it took to stay in the relationship. So I didn't do it for him, but I did say I would try to get pregnant. And of course, my heart wasn't in it, but my body was trying. So we tried naturally to get pregnant. That didn't work. We tried some less invasive procedures called IUI, turkey baster, for all intents and purposes. That didn't work, or sometimes it worked, and then we had miscarriages, and sometimes we had to have DNCs, which is essentially surgical removal of the products of
Hmm.
conception when the body doesn't release them. So we have had that a couple of times. We've done IVF. And most recently, we had a miscarriage in November, December. It was a long, drawn out miscarriage, and it ended up, we thought we were done with it. And I went in for an ultrasound to start the next cycle, and they told me that it wasn't over, and so that I needed another DNC. And so this was, I think, January, February. And right around that time, as we were scheduling this DNC, a couple of things happened. One was his thoughts came out like, hey, I'm still unhappy that we don't have kids yet. And I'm still blaming you. And I still want an apology. So I'm dealing with that. And then I'm dealing with having to do a DNC. And then this woman calls me up and says, hey, there's an Indian woman who's giving up her embryos that have been frozen for 4 years. So I signed up and said, yes, let's do it. And so we're having the DNC, we're working out our marriage issues with my husband's thoughts, and then we're also pursuing adopting these embryos. And that was back in early February. What it's now May. Um, so they've been adopted. We have three adopted embryos. It's a very similar process to adopting a child, but it's much, much shorter. And in this case, they were donated to us. There's no cost really involved. And now I'm prepping my body to receive the embryos. And so I'm starting hormones, and we'll be going to the embryos in June for my first transfer. There are three, but they transfer one at a time. So in some ways, instead of using my eggs that apparently were the problem, we know that scientifically, it was proven, and it was getting kind of hopeless to keep pursuing trying to get pregnant with my own genetic material, with our genetic material. So it seemed like we were not getting anywhere, and we kept hitting the same wall over and over. But now with these adopted embryos, it feels like there is hope again. And I think also just through mindset work, through being a coach, I've learned that it's okay to be excited along the way, even if the outcome isn't what you want it to be. So I can enjoy the process. And I really do enjoy the process. So even though I've started hormones and I take an injection every day, and I take a birth control pill every day, and I know that these other injections are coming, it's still really awesome that this woman and her husband decided to donate their embryos to help us make a family, you know? And they decided to donate the other two embryos that they had to another couple who lives very close to us, like just within miles of us, that we can create a new type of
Mm.
family. And then like the donor person, she interviewed for a job where I live. And so she actually came to town, and we actually met, we met the donor mom, and
Wow.
we met the other recipient couple, and we all went to dinner, and it was just like, this is possible. And so how can I not be excited? So when you see me like with a smile on my face, it's just because like this is a most incredible opportunity where we've been given a gift. I don't know where it's going to land, but
Right.
still amazing.
And your husband is okay, that this is not biologically your child, that you're just going to go through the process and you're going to raise, it's going
Yeah,
to be nurture versus nature a lot
exactly.
more.
It's a yes and a no again. So
Hmm.
we had to have a psychology appointment to proceed with the embryo adoption, and she said, you're not the genetic parents, but you are the birth and biological parents. That's how she put it. Those are the terms.
Hmm.
And that was a new way of hearing that for us. We hadn't heard that before. And so when she said it that way, it was kind of like ooh, that is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was big. But I think along the way, there's definitely a difference between how excited I am and how on board he is. Like he wants to be excited, but he's not innately excited like I am. Because I think he was still invested in his own genetic material being passed on, possibly because his parents have no grandkids. So my parents
That's a
do.
lot of pressure. That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
I think that I can, and I really hope um, that I don't know, and I want to talk to you a little bit more about the prep work because it seems that it's pretty intense. But what I wanted to say is, I think if you have the experience of going through pregnancy, I feel like no matter what you're carrying, I think that alone, that experience is a bonding experience between you and the baby, and between you and your husband and the baby. I feel like that's a nature takes care of that, and I think even in terms of like when you look at animals, when there's a stray and somebody's feeding, like they will pick up where it's,
Mhm.
cat, it doesn't matter, like there's just this like natural instinctual reaction that our body goes through. So if you're able to carry this pregnancy, I feel like it will complete the cycle and you would be able to bond in a way that that you're looking to, both of you, in different ways, I think.
Yeah.
So but talk to me about the process, because that feels, what do you have to do to prep your body to carry an embryo? Because you're not naturally
Okay.
going through that. So what are you doing?
I can compare it to IVF real quick, because in IVF it's almost like two parts. One is prepping your body to take eggs out of your body and then fertilize them, and then the last part is to prep your body to put the embryo back into the body. So I can skip the whole first part now that I don't have to create an embryo. I don't have to get eggs taken out of me. That to me was a really difficult process, especially because the retrieval of eggs is very painful. At least it was for me. Um, so this prepping that we're doing now, it actually doesn't seem so bad. I took birth control pills. Every morning I take 10 units of an injection with a small insulin needle, and it goes right under my skin. It's really easy. You don't have to numb your skin or anything. You would stand a little tiny pinch, and then it's over. So I do that myself. I don't need my husband's help with that. Soon
And
we're
what is that? Those hormonal?
Oh
Like
yes,
those are hormone?
it's supposed to induce menopause essentially. So
Why?
I don't understand the science behind it
Oh,
actually.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, I would
I'm
think that
not.
you would be prepping your body to hold the child, not to like completely shut down. I
Yes, I
don't know.
think what
That's
they do is like they shut it down and then they give you the amounts they want you to have. They
ah,
give you back the estrogen, they give you back the progesterone
okay.
in a very
Holy,
calculated amount. Yeah, so they
wow.
test your levels. Once you've induced this menopause, they test your levels, then they give you back this much estrogen, then they give you back this much progesterone by injection, by vaginal suppository, by patch, by mouth, whatever it might be. You also have to go
Wow.
on steroids to reduce any inflammation in your body because apparently some people have an autoimmune condition that can reject essentially an embryo. I never got autoimmune tested, but some people do. And in my case, my this fertility doctor has just blanketed everybody gets on steroids. So I will be eventually taking steroids, and I've never taken steroids before. So that would be interesting. And then there's some antibiotics involved, just like any other procedure. And also just to make sure that there's no infection in the uterus before we proceed. So everything needs to be nice and beautiful and plump and healthy to receive this embryo.
How long is the prep work before you actually
1 month,
get to
just
1 month?
just
So
one.
you're in it right now.
Yeah, I just started on Saturday.
What's so you're gonna be going through hopefully the process sometime in June?
Yes, yes, early June.
This is crazy.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, but it's crazy, but at the same time, it's like this is possible. Other people
Yeah,
need
the
to
the
know that this is possible.
it's incredible the amount of science and the amount of steps and like how figured out that is.
Mhm,
Like,
mhm.
um, it's, somewhat scary to me, but at the same time, it's really fascinating because you can give yourself a chance. I think that for people that are not, I have a lot of friends that have gotten pregnant via IVF. I
Mhm.
think that we are of a generation that, especially New York people,
Yeah.
we put our life and career ahead of everything, or just even having a good time, that it wasn't a necessity to have a
Mhm.
baby. It wasn't, where I come from, people have kids early on. My husband had kids at 25. And
Mhm.
at 25, I remember thinking like, what the fuck? Like that is not what I do. Um, and I think there's just like different set of desires, different set of like lifestyle, so
Yeah.
needless to say, fast forward to late 30s, early 40s, there's lots of IVF situations, and most of them are successful. It's drawn out and it's
Yeah.
requires a lot of patience, but I think that everybody that has gone through the process and obviously birthed a child, it was well worth it because
Okay. Well, it's
yeah.
good to hear that for in your circles at least that it was always successful because that's not what I've been hearing. But I think my view is so skewed now because I'm in circles where people are still struggling and in the infertility infertile doctor community. And I know this sounds weird, but there are Facebook groups for doctors with infertility, and then there's subgroups within that group. So there's the women who are doing IVF, then there's women who are ready to move on to donor eggs, and then there's women who are ready to move on to donor embryos, and then there are women who are ready to move on to
Wow,
adoption and surrogacy and all the different
that's
avenues.
crazy. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
So that's my
Wow.
world virtually, that's where I live. And so these people are not having success, but it's okay. Like I still feel very hopeful and I still feel excited even in the process, even if the result is not what we're aiming for.
I have to ask you a question. Over the course of this has been going on for a few years, right?
Yeah.
The IVF and all that.
17.
Um,
17.
what is your body like? How are you? Do you feel any changes? Do you feel like you are? How does your body feel?
My body has never been more healthy because in 2017, when I was trying to get pregnant and I couldn't, I was told I had some issues. And most of them I could change, luckily. So with gradual, slow changes in my food and exercise, my body is the healthiest it's ever been, and I just turned 46. So that is great. At the same time, it's really interesting that I think I've just experienced in the last 6 months my first two hot flashes. So
Oof.
my own perimenopausal symptoms before the medications that I'm taking that are inducing menopause. So it's really interesting. But I feel physically very ready for something like this. And my doctor also says that I shouldn't have a problem carrying a pregnancy. It was just the genetic material that made it a
Hmm.
non-viable pregnancy, and that's why it always miscarried. So
I'm happy to hear that because
yeah,
that's a lot of stress that you're putting your body through, like between all the different hormones back and forth. There's a lot of like, that's a lot of oscillation and what you're introducing, what you're
yeah,
taking out, and also, you know, going along or against, I'm not sure what's the right way to say, your own personal clock and, how your body's transitioning and what you're
yeah.
going through. So,
Our bodies
um,
are very resilient, I've seen.
that I know, that I
Yeah,
know, that I know.
yeah.
This is incredible.
Yes. This is like
Never.
really incredible. I adopted the embryos and like 2 weeks later, I was telling a friend about this, and she's 48 and wants kids. She's like, where do I get in on this situation of the embryos that are being donated? I was like, well, I'll hook you up with this Facebook group. Well, the following day, some girl calls me up. She said, I just heard an interview you did on a podcast. It's about infertility. And you spoke so freely and openly. And, we just really admire you. And you've always been so helpful to us. She's a cousin of a cousin. So she said, we have embryos and we'd like to donate them to you. And I was like, thank you. But I have 3 now. But I have this friend. So that friend actually turns out wasn't ready, but there was another friend and they're talking. So,
Wow.
and then the other friend was like, well, I would love to have the embryos, but then I need a surrogate. She can't carry pregnancy. I was like, well, actually, somebody offered to be a surrogate for me. So I could offer you that too if you want.
Why do people have extra embryos? Like, are
Oh,
they,
when they
what
do
is,
IVF,
okay.
you take out as many eggs as you produce, and then you fertilize as many of those that will get fertilized, and then however many end up being healthy, they freeze as embryos.
Okay. So you're
So
just,
people just have extras lying around because inevitably this is what happens. You do IVF, you have a baby sometimes, and then the second time around, you get naturally pregnant. You don't
right.
do anything. You don't even use the embryos that you froze for yourself. Happens all the time.
Um, I'll include that because I do actually have quite a number of Indian friends.
Mm.
And I think that, like anything, when people hear something, it's like who you know, how you know, it's just like,
Yes.
the word of mouth is really incredible. But I feel like, if anything, for me, the ability to share with more people just the sort of genuinely kind human being that you are, and how you have over the years, and I don't even know you that well, but what I know, the the beauty of how you transition through all of your like life experiences and what you've done, and with such grace and such understanding and also such honesty outwardly. I feel like it's a true gift, and if you're able to offer that to somebody else, I feel like they should know about it. So
Thank you.
of course. Um, is there anything else that you want to leave with? Because this has been such a there's just so much information, and I feel like you've always been so generous with sharing about your life and your experiences. Is there anything else that we'd want to land on right here into my heart?
Yeah. This is only happening because we have the power of being open. Like if I can be open, then you have that memory of me being an open person. You want to invite collaboration between what I'm doing and what you're doing. You're bringing to light the art, the creativity that you have that has such depth that I got to know about because we're doing this. But it's just full circle. I mean, being open has so many advantages, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why not? Like, why hold it inside? Why not
Yes.
share everything that you know? Who knows who can benefit, let alone
Right.
yourself? Look
Right.
how many opportunities are coming to me. I get to have this conversation with you today. We get to record it. We get to put it out there. We get to let other people hear about it. Somebody might be inspired to adopt an embryo. Somebody might be inspired to share their stories while they create their jewelry. Like, you don't know what's going to happen because you open
Right.
yourself up to being judged, right? Let other people judge you, but then also see what else it could bring. I mean, I think the power of sharing is the greatest power that we have. Like, why not share it? And now we have social media, we have video, we have live. There's so many ways to do it. It's the perfect opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. I love that you are that way, because not many people are. And I think that you find so many different things like empathy, you find self-assurance, you find answers, you find different perspectives by sort of being open and putting that out there. If you're curious, not everybody's wired that way, but I feel like for those of us that have questions, you
Yeah.
know, I'm the first person they'll put it out there like into ether and be like, I
Yes.
want to know why.
Yeah. Well, that's probably why
So
we're here together on this call.
yes, yes. I really, really admire you and I appreciate you. And I love that we connect in random ways. And I always really enjoy our conversations. You're just a shining light, and you're just like a kindness out of your heart is really, it shines really bright. So thank you.
Yeah.
And I'll connect with you in a month next month. I wish you the best of
Oh
luck,
yeah.
but I know you're in it, and whatever the outcome is, I know
Yeah.
it's going to be the best outcome for you and your family. So
Excellent.
thank you.
Thank you.